So I feel like we need a little break from all the Touhou shmup shenanigans after 2 videos. I mean, I originally made this channel to talk about Touhou Fangame, so I feel like I should deliver on that front as well. As some of you may know, I've been streaming for a while now at twitch.tv/tenkoex, you should check it out by the way, and one of the games I got to play there was one I've already known for some time, but for one reason or another, I never really gave it a shot until now. Which is weird since it draws inspiration from one of my favorite series of all time, Castlevania. Just pure classic platforming action. I know Castlevania is more commonly associated with the Metroidvania genre nowadays, but its roots as a good old side-scroller are still pretty solid, and it's definitely still worth giving the games a go every now and then. Even though those games were very often on the verge of being frustratingly difficult, I really enjoyed the challenge they offered and had a lot of fun with them. Except for Castlevania 3, we don't talk about that one. In any case, while that series is pretty much dead and buried at this point, thanks Konami, even more so when talking about classic Castlevania, no, that doesn't count. Of course, there had to be someone at some point who tried to add Touhou characters to the mix. And so that's how we ended up with this little fan game called Koumajou Densetsu Scarlet Symphony, or more commonly known as Touhouvania here in the West. Developed by Circle Frontier Asia, it was originally released on August 16, 2009, before getting an update release on July 27, 2022 on Steam and Nintendo Switch. It got renamed to Koumajou Remilia for whatever reason. Anyways, just for the record, I'm gonna be talking about the Steam version specifically because that's the one I played. So I'm not really gonna be aware of any minute differences between each version, keep that in mind. As soon as you boot up the game, you're greeted by the opening movie, which doesn't really have much to it, but the music's alright. It's just pretty much here to present all the characters, and I wanna get this out of the way right now, but the art direction for this game is just fantastic. Everyone gets redesigns to go better with the more gothic style of Castlevania, and yeah, it fits the part. There are so many details to the outfits without ever feeling like it's too much. I think my favorite has to be Marisa, I mean look at this. Sure, she's missing her iconic big ass hat, but everything else more than makes up for it. Kinda reminds me of the Hunter for Bloodborne. Wait, hold on, when did that release? Wow, I can't believe From Software ripped off a Touhou fan. It's so iconic that this game even gets some fanart of its own. That's amazing. Particularly Sakuya for whatever reason. Like there's a lot of fanart of this particular Sakuya design if you start looking around. And then you have Alice who's just... well, Alice. That's just regular Alice. I don't know, I guess they deemed she would already fit in pretty well in the Castlevania setting, and maybe they were onto something because she does not look out of place here surprisingly. Anyways, now that we covered that, we can talk about the actual game now. Upon starting, you get a little monologue by Redmu explaining the plot, which is basically a retelling of Embodiment of Scarlet Devil, of course, with some things changed here and there. I'm not really gonna go over the writing because it's what you'd expect really. Once you take control of Redmu, well yeah, it's Castlevania, what else can I say? You got your jump, your whip, your strut. It's not quite on par with the Belmont strut, but there was an attempt here and I can appreciate that. Also, I love that Reimu's just using the Gohei as a whip, that's just perfect honestly. I was a bit disappointed that there's no upgrades for it though, but I guess you can think about it as always being fully upgraded. She can slide on the ground which does no damage, but helps with dodging a bit, and also has access to the backflip from some of the Castlevania games, and like in those, I never really found much use for it, but I guess it could help avoid certain situations if used properly. That's all well and all, but let's get to the one new thing this game brings to the table, which is just straight up flying. Yes, in the true spirit of Touhou Project, Reimu can fly in this game. However, apparently she's not able to use the whip at all while flying, all she can do is shoot amulets that have the same strength as a mosquito bite. Except it's like, a lot of them. I think it's more about giving you some way to defend yourself while in the air rather than an actual attack. It's just not worth it most of the time when the whip already deals more damage and does so way faster to boot. Honestly, flying in general is not that useful really, outside of making some sections a bit easier and helping with mobility for some bosses. It's kinda funny though that if you try flying over everything in the first stage, you get ambushed by some anti-air enemies, sending you right back to the ground. Also, I didn't know where to put this, but there's no wall meat in this game. Instead, you can find healing items inside pods across the stage. It's fine, this is not a criticism in any way, but I do like my wall meat. The way some weapons work is also a bit different, in that you don't have to pick them up while going through the stages. Instead, you briefly summon one of your 3 companions to do their attack, which you can swap at any time, those being Marisa, Chirno, and Suika. Marisa you get at the very beginning of the game, and she shoots 2 stars that will both explode into 4 smaller stars if they don't hit anything. The damage is pretty alright, and while I didn't think much of it on my first run, the second time around I found it incredibly useful for dealing with enemies that are just out of reach for the whip. It kinda feels the same purpose as the axe in Castlevania. Next we have Chirno, who shoots a projectile that travels a fixed distance and then leaves an explosion for a while, dealing damage to anything in its radius. And if you manage to land it on a target, the explosion is bigger, although I can't tell if the damage is different. It's ridiculous how good she is, especially for dealing with bosses if you can time it right, and you get her at the very beginning of the game as well. Good job, Churro, you really are the strongest. Finally, we have Suika, who is just complete garbage. She is essentially a souped up holy water from Castlevania, shooting 4 flames instead of 1, which you'd think would be amazing, but it's not. First of all, you have no control over where the flames land, so already targeting a specific enemy is a pain. But even if you do hit them, the damage is just pitiful. You might as well just use the whip at this point. And that's leaving out a very important detail, which is that many of the enemies in this game can fly, including the bosses, so that already greatly limits its usefulness. And to top it all off, you get Suika very late in the game when there's like 2 stages left, one of them being the clock tower, you know, almost exclusively a vertical stage. So yeah, don't even bother with Suika, just stick to the other 2 you get much earlier, that's all you need really. Alright, so again, this is just Castlevania. You go through stages, do some platforming, kill some enemies here and there, and fight a boss at the end of each stage. That said, is it a good Castlevania game? Well, that's debatable. I'm just gonna be straightforward here, the stages are boring as hell. Every single stage just feels like you're going through the same rooms over and over, with barely anything different in them except for a few different enemies. To me, it just seems that for each stage they had like 3 or 4 preset rooms and just arranged them in whatever way seemed nice and call it a day. I think the worst offender here has to be the library. I mean, look at this. It's literally just the same 2 rooms most of the time. It's dull as hell. And again, it's not like they have anything particularly interesting in them. There is very little in terms of smart enemy placement, almost no strategy, there's barely any hazards to watch out for, most of which you can just fly over, mind you. Even graphically it's always the same. I mean, what is there is nice to look at for sure, but there's like no set pieces unique to certain rooms. There's no Medusa heads for fuck's sake. And the worst part is that they drag on, it just keeps going on, and with nothing new to get your attention, again, they're just boring. So that's a bad sign when 80% of the game is not particularly interesting, but what about the remaining 20%? What about the boss fights? Well, if I had to guess, this is probably where all the focus went, because they're actually pretty alright. All of them do require some level of strategy to get through them, and I found it fun to figure out the openings I had to land my attacks. Except for Patchouli, where the strategy is just keep attacking and hope she dies before you do, because her attacks just cover the whole screen. Which brings me to my next point, yeah, they're hard as balls. Bullets are not particularly easy to dodge in this format, mind you, and while bosses always loop through the same attacks in the same order, there's like almost no delay between each one. As soon as one ends, you get like 1 second to get your bearings and try to land a hit before the next one starts. Which also means it's very easy to get stun locked, where all you can do is watch as your health bar goes down. But after some trial and error, I managed to take them down just fine. Thing is, if you do lose all your extra lives, you go back to the beginning of the stage, and we already went over how fun those are, so here's what I do. I go to the options menu and set the lives counter to the maximum 20. Yeah, I'm taking the easy way out. No, I don't feel bad about it. Again, there's barely any challenge when going through the stages. Having to redo them just to have a few more goes at the boss ends up feeling like a chore real quick, especially when it comes to the extra stage. Yes, there's an extra stage, this is Touhou, you know how it goes. It's just one short level, not much to say about it. It's essentially a gauntlet where you fight Rumia, Meilin, Sakuya and Patchouli. You get a good batch of healing items after Sakuya, but only a couple of them after Patchy. That's it. Then you're sent to fight the boss of the gym herself, Flandre. Who is, as you might expect, the hardest encounter in this game, requiring some really precise movement to dodge her attacks and good use of the very small openings you get to deal damage. And considering you lose a few lives just getting here, I think it's reasonable to want to have the most amount of tries before having to reset, right? I'm sure it's very satisfying to beat the extra stage all in one go, but I'm not up for it honestly. I mentioned the graphics in passing somewhere back there, and again, while I feel like the composition in the stages is a bit lacking, what is there does look pretty nice. Funnily enough, it seems to draw more from Symphony of the Night rather than the actual Castlevania games, and I think that might be part of the reason the stages look so weird. You know, making levels for a Metroidvania is not quite the same as doing so for a side-scroller. By the way, small side note, the bat sprite in particular looks almost one-to-one to the one from that game. I noticed that, I see what you're doing. But anyways, it looks pretty damn good and that's what matters. My only real complaint about the graphics is that the sprites seem to have that smooth filter going on instead of the crispy pixelated look, but that's a very minor thing. Music's also pretty good, and something interesting about the soundtrack is that it completely forgoes arranging any track from the Touhou games, instead opting for original compositions more akin to what you hear in a Castlevania game. And again, they did a good job at it, even if sometimes it feels like they were clearly trying a bit too hard. Like, listen to this. Or this. This one in particular pissed me off so much. You have no idea how badly I was expecting to hear bloody tears, and then it just isn't. Sure, you can see in the titles that it's obviously supposed to be in reference to the originals, but I mean, come on now. Since we're talking about the audio, I might as well bring up the voice acting. I originally had a whole section written for this, going on about how it's not very good, but after sleeping on it, it's alright. I don't really have much to say about the voice acting itself. It's not amazing, but it's not really as bad as I first thought. Which makes sense, I mean, they did get a full cast of professional voice actresses to play the characters here, so there's no way the performances themselves are gonna be poor. That said, the direction is a little bit lacking. Like at times everyone just sounds really out of it. Rainbow in particular sounds bored out of her mind all the way through. I know that does sound fitting for her character, but I can't say it was intended here. And while I don't really like tossing this word around, all the voices are a bit
Oya, oya, nani ka to omoeba.
お前は
コーマ館のメイド。待ってましたよ。お、あなたたちならもっと早くたどり着けると思ってたけど。っていうか、なんであんたがここにいるのよ。
こっちが聞きたいわ。なんでお前がこんなところに。あ、チルノじゃん。なんで
あたい見て笑うのさ。
generic, I guess. The only real criticism I can give is that the audio mixing is awful. Like, unless they are screaming, half the time you can barely hear what the characters are saying. But again, I'm not really here for the voice acting, to be honest. It wasn't even a feature in the original release of the game. Yeah, this is completely new to the 2022 re-release, with the Steam page even boasting about it being a new exclusive feature to this version. Yeah, not much to look forward to here, but sure, it's alright, I don't really feel either way about it. Alright, so usually when making these videos, when playing Touhou fan games in general, I try to glaze over most of the negative stuff I find because at the end of the day, I understand what I'm dealing with. Most Touhou fan games are, as the name implies, passion projects made by the fans of the series. You know, just a bunch of people who got together and decided to make something fun based on the series they love. And that's really the only question I ask myself when it comes to recommending a game. Did I have fun with it? For this case, the answer is yes, honestly. I had fun streaming it the first time and then playing it again on my own for this video. But I feel like I would be doing a disservice and, well, straight up lying, if I didn't point out the flaws this game has. And well, I feel like the fact that it manages to remain fun despite those flaws is an accomplishment on its own. The art style alone makes this one of the most iconic Touhou fan games out there, and I'd say it's definitely worth getting the full experience if you're up to the challenge. All that said, the asking price on Steam is $30 for what is essentially a 2-hour game at most. Yeah, I don't know about that one, Chief, I'm not gonna sugarcoat that part, maybe wait and see if it goes on a very generous sale or something to pick it up. Thank you all for watching, if you enjoyed the video consider leaving a like and subscribing to support the channel. With that, see you next stream.